Need you to picture a 6-year-old boy sitting in a plastic chair in a government building hallway. He's wearing a shirt that's slightly too big and shoes that are slightly too small. His hands are folded in his lap, like he was taught to sit properly a long time ago by someone who isn't here anymore. His eyes are dark and enormous, and they are watching everything, every person who walks by, every door that opens, with the careful attention of a child who has learned that the world is unpredictable and that watching it closely is the only protection available. He hasn't spoken in 2 years. Not a word, not a sound, not his name, not a request, not a cry. The caseworkers call it selective mutism brought on by trauma. The file says he was found alone in an apartment after 3 days. The file says a lot of things that I am not going to repeat because they belong to him and not to this story. What the file doesn't say, what no file could say, is what happened when that little boy looked up from that plastic chair and saw me walk through the door. He looked at me for a long time, assessing, deciding, and then, very slowly, he unfolded his hands and held one out, just like that. No words, no smile, just a hand. I took it. My name is Simone Elaine Archer. I am 31 years old. I am a single woman living in Nashville, Tennessee, and the moment I took that child's hand was the moment my life split into before and after. What came after was more beautiful, and more complicated, and more shocking than anything I could have written for myself. Stay with me right now. Before we go 1 second further, drop your city and your country in those comments. I want to know where in this world someone is receiving this story. You matter to me. Show me where you are. My name is Simone Archer, and before Noah, I was a woman in the process of becoming. I grew up in Franklin, Tennessee, a suburb of Nashville. The kind of place that is wealthy enough to be comfortable and southern enough to have opinions about everything, including what a 31-year-old single woman ought to be doing with her life. I was the youngest of 2 children. My brother Damien was 4 years older, married, 2 kids, a mortgage, and a landscaping business he'd built from nothing, which made him, in our father's eyes, the gold standard of adult achievement. My father, Gerald Archer, was a man built from a specific southern template that I both loved and struggled against my whole life. He was 64 years old, a retired civil engineer, a deacon at our Baptist church, a man who had strong opinions about right and wrong and the correct order of things, and who delivered those opinions with the calm certainty of someone who had never been seriously wrong about anything in his own estimation. He loved me. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because this story could make it sound otherwise. Gerald Archer loved his daughter with a genuine, consistent, present love that I never doubted. He showed up for everything. He fixed things in my apartment without being asked. He called every Sunday. He was there. He was also, in certain specific ways, immovable. There was a picture in his mind of how my life was supposed to look. Marriage, then a home, then children, in that order, with a man he could respect and a church community that could witness it. This picture was not cruel. It came from a place of genuine love and genuine cultural formation. But it was rigid, and I had been, all my life, a slightly irregular shape for the frame he'd built. I had a master's degree in social work. I worked for the Tennessee Department of Children's Services for 6 years, the kind of work that fills you and depletes you in equal measure, that shows you the worst of what humans do to each other and the best of what they can recover from. I had been in 2 serious relationships that had ended for different reasons and left me at 31 genuinely uncertain about the romantic timeline my father kept referencing. What I was certain about was children. I had known since my mid-20s that I wanted to be a mother. Not conditionally, not if the right man comes along or when the timing is right. I wanted to be a mother with the specific, unconditional certainty that some people have about their purpose. And I had been thinking for 2 years about adoption. 6 years working in child welfare will do things to you. It will show you children who have been through things that no language adequately describes and who still somehow reach toward connection the way plants reach toward light, instinctive, persistent, almost impossible to fully extinguish. It will show you how the foster and adoption system works at its best and at its worst. It will show you the children who get chosen quickly, the babies, the toddlers, the neurotypical kids without complicated histories, and the children who wait, and keep waiting. The ones who wait were the ones I thought about: older children, children with trauma histories, children with physical or developmental differences, children who had been in the system long enough that hope had gone quiet in them, not gone, just quiet, tamped down by disappointment into something small and protected. I had started the adoption process 14 months before I met Noah. Home study, background checks, training, financial review, the full machinery of a system that is simultaneously desperately underfunded and appropriately rigorous, that is trying to protect children who have already been failed once. I had been approved as an adoptive parent for 8 months. I had been matched with 2 children before Noah. The first match dissolved when the child was reunified with a relative. The second, a 7-year-old girl I had visited 4 times and was beginning to love, was adopted by a 2-parent family that the agency decided was a stronger placement. I understood both outcomes intellectually. Emotionally, they cost me things I didn't entirely account for at the time. And then my caseworker called me about Noah. His full name in the system was Noah James. No last name. He'd been given a placeholder last name by the agency after he came into care. He was 6 years old. He had been in foster care for 14 months, following removal from his biological mother's home. The notes were careful and clinical, in the way that official documents are careful and clinical, when they are describing something that defies careful clinical language. What they conveyed, beneath the terminology, was this: Noah had witnessed something traumatic. Noah had stopped speaking approximately 2 months after entering care. Noah had been assessed by 3 therapists, all of whom agreed that his mutism was trauma-induced and that with the right environment and consistent patient support, speech could return. All 3 noted that Noah was highly intelligent, emotionally perceptive, and possessed of an inner life that expressed itself through drawing, gesture, and an intense quality of attention. He had been in 2 foster placements. Both had disrupted, not because of anything Noah had done, but because the families had found the silence, sustained over months, more than they'd been prepared for. My caseworker said, "Simone, I'm sending you his file because I think you're the right person for him. You know how to read kids who can't tell you what they need. You're patient, you're trained, and you're not going to be scared off by quiet." I read his file on a Tuesday night at my kitchen table. Wednesday morning, I called and said I wanted to meet him. The Tennessee Department of Children's Services Visitation Center in Nashville is a building that tries very hard to be warm and only partially succeeds. There are murals on the walls and toys in baskets and chairs in colors that suggest cheerfulness. It smells like cleaning solution, an old carpet, and something indefinably institutional. Noah was sitting in the hallway when I arrived, in that plastic chair in that slightly too big shirt. His caseworker, a woman named Tanya, who had clearly developed a protective attachment to this child that she was professionally required to keep in check, was sitting next to him. Tanya stood when she saw me. Noah did not stand. He looked up. I had been in hundreds of these rooms. I had met dozens of children in these circumstances. I knew not to come in with too much energy, too much smile, too much of the performed warmth that children in care learn very quickly to recognize and distrust. I walked in at the pace of someone who had nowhere else to be. I crouched down to his level, not forcing eye contact, just making myself small and available. I said, "Hi, Noah. My name is Simone. I thought we could just hang out for a little while today if that's okay with you." He looked at me for a long time. Then he held out his hand. I took it. We sat together in the visitation room for 90 minutes. I had brought colored pencils and a blank sketchbook, which Tanya had told me he loved. He drew. I sat beside him and didn't fill the silence with noise, which I think surprised him. Most adults fill silence with children. I had learned in 6 years of this work that silence with a child is not emptiness, it's permission. By the end of the 90 minutes, he had drawn a picture, a house, 2 figures in front of it, one tall, one small. He slid it across the table to me without looking up. I looked at the picture for a long time. Then I looked at him. He was watching me from the corner of his eye, waiting. "I love it," I said. "Can I keep it?" He nodded. Once, decisive. I drove home and called Tanya and said, "I want to move forward." I told my father about Noah on a Sunday after church. This was deliberate. Sunday after church was when my father was most himself, most settled, most accessible to conversations that required him to be his best version. We were at his house, the house I'd grown up in, sitting in the living room with sweet tea. My mother had passed 8 years earlier, breast cancer, 2 years from diagnosis to goodbye, and my father had maintained the house exactly as she'd kept it, which told you everything about how he loved her. Her reading chair was still in the corner. Her Bible was still on the side table. I said, "Daddy, I need to tell you about something I'm doing. I've been matched with a child for adoption. A little boy, he's 6 years old. His name is Noah." My father looked at me. He set down his sweet tea. I told him about Noah, carefully, protecting the specifics of his history, telling my father what he needed to know. I told him about the mutism. I told him about the trauma history in the broadest strokes. I told him about the visitation, about the drawing, about the hand. My father was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "Simone, you're 31 years old and you're not married." "I know how old I am, Daddy. A child needs a father and a mother. A child needs love and stability," I said. "Noah has been in the system for over a year. He needs a permanent home." "Then let a family give him one," my father said. "A complete family. The word complete landed the way he intended it to, as a description of what I was not. I am a complete family, I said. I am a woman with a home and a career and a support system and a heart that has room for this child. That is complete. My father shook his head. Not angrily, with the slow, sorrowing certainty of a man who believes he's watching someone make a mistake. You're throwing your life away, he said. What man is going to want to take on a woman with a damaged? Don't, I said. My voice went very quiet. Do not call him damaged. My father stopped. His name is Noah, I said. He is 6 years old. He has been through things that would break most adults, and he is still reaching toward the world. He is not damaged. He is extraordinary, and I am going to bring him home. My father looked at me for a long moment, then the first don't know what to say to you, he said. You don't have to say anything, I said. I'm not asking for your permission. I drove home. I cried in the car, not from doubt, but from the grief of needing my father's blessing and not having it. Those are different things, and I want to be clear about that. I did not doubt my decision for a single second. I grieved that the man who loved me most couldn't see what I saw. Noah came home 3 weeks later. The placement happened on a Thursday. I had prepared his room, not extravagantly, because I didn't want to overwhelm him, but carefully. A good bed, soft lighting, a shelf for books, a low table with art supplies, because I knew that was his language. I had put one of his drawings, the house with the 2 figures, framed on his wall. Tanya brought him. He arrived with everything he owned in a backpack and a garbage bag. He stood in the doorway of his new room and looked around for a long time. Then he walked to the frame drawing on the wall and touched the frame with one finger. Then he walked to the bed and sat on it and looked at me. I said, "This is your room, your home. You don't have to do anything or say anything or be anything different than you are. We're just going to figure this out together." He lay down on the bed, on top of the covers, still in his shoes, and went to sleep. I sat in the doorway and watched him sleep and felt something so large and so complete move through me that I don't have language adequate for it. I called my father the next day to tell him Noah was home. He said, "I've thought about this a great deal, Simone. I prayed about it, and I have to tell you the truth as I see it. I cannot support this decision. I cannot be part of it. You have chosen a path I don't understand and can't endorse, and until you're willing to reconsider, I think it's better if we have some space." "Daddy, I love you," he said. "That does not change, but I cannot watch you do this." He hung up. I put the phone down on my kitchen counter. In his room, Noah was drawing. I went and sat beside him and watched him draw, and I told myself that this, right here, this room, this child, this quiet was enough. It had to be enough. I had chosen it. The first 3 months with Noah were the education of my life. Not hard in the way I'd expected. I had braced for crisis, for meltdowns, for the behavioral expressions of trauma that I'd seen in my professional life. Some of that came in waves at unpredictable moments, but mostly what those first months were was quiet, careful, the slow, patient work of 2 people figuring out how to be safe with each other. Noah communicated in layers. First through drawing elaborate, detailed pictures that told stories and expressed needs and processed feelings with an articulation that his silence couldn't diminish. I learned to read them the way you learn a language, slowly at first, then with increasing fluency, until the drawings felt as clear to me as speech, then through gesture. He developed a small private vocabulary with me, a tap on my arm for "I need something," a specific look for "I'm scared," a way of pressing his forehead against my arm that I came to understand as "I love you" before I had words to name it. Then, very slowly, through presence, the way he would find me in whatever room I was in and simply be near me, not demanding anything, not performing anything, just choosing proximity. The way he started sleeping through the night around month 2, which his therapist said was significant. The way he began, cautiously, to eat more at meals. His therapist was a woman named Dr. Patricia Webb, a child trauma specialist who had 20 years of experience with kids like Noah and who met with him twice a week in a room full of sand trays and art supplies. Dr. Webb told me early on, "He trusts you. I can see it in how he talks about you." "He talks about me," I said, surprised. Dr. Webb smiled. "Not with words, but yes, he talks about you." I got my brother Damien in Noah's life early. Damien, good, steady, uncomplicated Damien, took to Noah immediately and without fanfare, which was exactly what Noah needed. He would come over on Saturdays and work on simple projects with Noah, birdhouses, small woodworking things, in a companionable silence that Noah found comfortable. His kids, 8 and 6, were cautious friends for Noah in the way that children are cautious friends with each other when they're feeling each other out. My father was not there. I had left the door open. I always leave doors open, but he had not walked through it. I missed him. I missed him with a specific ache that surprised me in its persistence. Not his approval. I had made peace with not having that. Just him, my father, the man who fixed things and called on Sundays. His absence had a shape. Month 7 was when Noah began to make sounds. Not words, sounds. humming, mostly, quiet and private, the kind you do when you don't realize you're doing it. I heard it first one evening when I was making dinner and he was drawing at the kitchen table. A soft, tuneless hum. I did not react, did not look up, did not comment, did not do anything to make him aware that I had heard. I just let it be, the way you let a shy animal approach when you know that sudden movement will send it back. The humming became a regular thing. Then occasionally a sound that was almost a syllable, the beginning of a word that didn't complete itself, like a car engine turning over that hasn't quite caught. Dr. Webb said, "He's getting ready. His nervous system is beginning to feel safe enough. Don't push. Don't reward specifically. Just let it come." "I'll let it come." "Month 8, he said more at dinner. Reaching for the bread basket, eyes on the table, voice barely above a breath. One word. More. I put more bread on his plate. I did not cry. I did not make a production of it. I said, "Here you go." As if it was the most ordinary thing, because I wanted it to feel ordinary for him. Like something he could do without consequence. He looked up at me briefly. Something moved across his face. Then he looked back at his plate and ate his bread. I called Dr. Webb from the bathroom later that night and cried quietly for about 4 minutes while she said, I know on the other end of the line. Then I washed my face and went back out and helped Noah with his bath and read him 3 books and tucked him in. Ordinary. I wanted it all to feel ordinary. 2 years after Noah came home, he was 8 years old. He had, over those 2 years, developed a vocabulary that he used sparingly but meaningfully, words for needs, for preferences, for the occasional comment that he delivered with the gravity of someone who had learned that words were significant and should not be wasted. He was not a chatty child. He was a precise one. Every word he spoke had been chosen. He called me Mama. He had started this around month 10, dropped it into a conversation as casually as if he'd always said it, and I had received it with the same practiced calm I brought to everything with Noah, while internally experiencing something seismic. He was doing better in every measurable way. School was still challenging. The social navigation of a second-grade classroom was complex for a child who spoke rarely and who had learned to read people rather than perform for them. But his teacher, a patient woman named Mrs. Okafor, had created space for him that worked. My father had called twice in 2 years. Both times brief, careful, asking how I was without asking about Noah, which told me everything about where he still was with it. And then one evening in November, Noah and I were sitting on the couch after dinner. He was drawing, he was always drawing, and I was reading. The television was off. The house was quiet in the way it got in the evenings, a settled, domestic quiet that I had come to love. Noah stopped drawing. He looked at his paper for a moment. Then he looked up at me. "Mama," he said. "Yeah, baby?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in his careful, deliberate way, my daddy's name was Gerald. I went very still. "My first daddy," he said. "Before, his name was Gerald. He used to come sometimes." I looked at my son. My heart was doing something irregular in my chest. "Gerald," I said carefully. "Do you remember his last name?" Noah thought about it. His brow furrowed with the effort. "Archer," he said. "Gerald Archer." I put my book face down on the couch cushion. I looked at my son, who had gone back to his drawing as if he had simply shared a small piece of information rather than detonating something. Gerald Archer. My father's name was Gerald Archer. There are moments in life when your brain receives information that it cannot immediately process. Not because you don't understand the words, but because the implications of the words are so large and so unexpected that the mind needs a moment to find the edges of the thing before it can begin to look at it directly. I sat on my couch for what felt like a long time. Then I said, as gently and as normally as I could manage, "Noah, can you tell me about Gerald? What do you remember?" Noah drew a line on his paper. He was careful with what he shared about before. I had never pushed, and he shared in his own time and his own way. He considered my question with the seriousness he brought to everything. "He was old," Noah said. "He smelled like church." A pause. "He came to our apartment sometimes. He brought me a truck once. Red." He smelled like church. My father smelled like church. Specifically like the cedar and old wood smell of First Baptist Franklin, where he had been a deacon for 22 years. It was specific and unmistakable, and I had never in my life heard anyone else describe that way. "Did Gerald know your mom?" I asked. "Yes," Noah said simply. "Do you know how?" Noah considered this for a long moment. Then he said, "She was sad when he stopped coming." I excused myself to the kitchen. I stood at the sink with the water running and I breathed. Gerald Archer, my father, who had come to an apartment, who had brought a little boy a red truck, who had stopped coming, who, 2 years later, his daughter had adopted that little boy without either of them knowing the connection. I turned off the water. I went back to the couch. I tucked Noah in that night with my whole heart in my throat, and then I picked up my phone. Want to be honest with you about the next 3 days because they were among the strangest of my life. I did not call my father immediately. I needed to know or to confirm because part of me already knew before I walked into that conversation. I needed facts, not suspicion. I called Tanya, Noah's former caseworker, the next morning. I asked her what she could tell me about Noah's biological mother, not the confidential specifics, but the general picture. Tanya was careful, as she had to be, but she said she was a young woman, early 20s. She had some support from an older man for a period, someone she'd been in a relationship with. The relationship ended before Noah came into care. An older man. I pulled up everything I could find about Noah's case that I had access to as his adoptive parent. The documents were redacted in the appropriate places. But I found, in the older intake documents, a reference to a man who had been interviewed during the initial investigation, described as a family friend who had been a presence in the home periodically. The interview had been brief. He had not been found to have any involvement in the circumstances of Noah's removal. He had provided contact information, and then, apparently, not been contacted further. The contact information was redacted, but the date of birth of the person interviewed was not. February 8th, 1960. My father's birthday is February 8th, 1960. I sat with that document for a long time. Then I drove to Franklin Nee, did not call ahead. I needed to see his face. He answered the door on a Saturday morning in November, in his weekend clothes, khaki pants, and a flannel shirt, with a cup of coffee in his hand, and the particular expression of a man who is surprised and uncertain whether the surprise is welcome. "Simone," he said. "I need to talk to you," I said. "Can I come in?" He stepped back. I came in. I sat in the living room, my mother's chair actually, which I had never sat in before and sat in now without thinking about it. My father sat across from me. I looked at my father for a long moment. Gerald Archer, 66 years old, deacon at First Baptist. The man who fixed things and called on Sundays and had not called in 2 years because he could not accept the child I had brought home. I said, "Daddy, I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me. This is not a trap. This is not an accusation, but I need the truth." He looked at me steadily. "All right. Did you know a young woman, early 20s, lived in Nashville about 8 or 9 years ago? A woman you had a relationship with for some period of time?" The steadiness in my father's face changed. Something behind his eyes shifted, not guilt exactly, more like the recognition of a door he had closed a long time ago that was being found and opened from the other side. He was quiet for a very long time. "Daddy," I said quietly. He set his coffee cup down. He looked at his hands. "Her name was Aisha," he said. "My mother had been gone for 2 years when my father met Aisha Williams." He told me this in a voice that was stripped of its usual authority, smaller, more careful, the voice of a man accounting for something he had never accounted for out loud. Aisha was 23. He was 56. She worked at a dry cleaner 2 blocks from his office. He had started going in weekly for shirts. They had talked. She was bright and warm and funny, and she was going through a hard time, a mother who was ill, money that was too tight, a life that was not going the way she'd hoped. He had found himself looking forward to those conversations in a way he hadn't looked forward to much of anything in the 2 years since my mother died. He was not proud of what followed. He said that plainly, not minimizing it, not dressing it up. He had been lonely in a way he hadn't admitted to anyone, not his children, not his pastor, not himself. He had made choices that he knew, even as he was making them, were not right by his own standards. The relationship with Aisha had lasted about 18 months before he ended it, he said, because his conscience had finally gotten loud enough to drown out everything else. He had not known about Noah. Aisha had never told him she was pregnant. He had not known in any form that a child existed. I looked at my father as he told me this. He was not crying. Gerald Archer did not cry, or if he did it was in private, but he looked older than I had ever seen him look. The weight of the thing he'd been carrying and of the new weight I had just handed him, visible in his face. "Daddy," I said. "Noah's middle name in the system is James. His biological mother's last name was Williams. Her first name," my father looked up, "was Aisha," I said. The color went out of his face. "Noah told me about you," I said. "He said his first daddy's name was Gerald. He said you smelled like church. He said you brought him a red truck." My father put his hand over his mouth. "He is your son," I said, "and I adopted him. Your daughter adopted your son, and you have spent 2 years refusing to be part of his life because you decided I wasn't qualified to be his mother." The silence in that living room, my mother's living room, with her Bible on the side table in her chair, the one I was sitting in, was the loudest silence I have ever sat in. My father broke in that living room. Not dramatically. Not with collapse or confession or theatrical grief. Gerald Archer broke the way strong. Private men break quietly, incrementally, the composure coming apart piece by piece, until what was left was just a man sitting in his own living room facing something enormous. He said, "I didn't know about him. I need you to believe that." "I believe you," I said. "I believe you," I said again. "Simone," his voice was barely there. "I told you that child was damaged. I told you to let a real family take him. And he stopped. He looked at the ceiling. "He was mine." "He is mine," I said. "He is mine and he is yours, and he does not know yet what the connection is. He knows your name. He remembers you. He remembered you to me." I paused. "He called you his first daddy." My father made a sound I had never heard from him, brief and involuntary, and from somewhere very deep. I sat with him in that room for a long time. I did not comfort him, not yet, not immediately, because I was also in the middle of receiving something enormous. But I stayed. I was there. After a while, my father said, "What do I do?" And I said, "You start by telling me everything, and then we figure out together how to tell Noah." We did not tell Noah immediately. Dr. Webb was the first person we brought into the conversation, before anyone else, before Damien, before anyone at the church or in the family. She needed to know. This was Noah's life and Noah's truth, and the way he received it had to be handled with the care that his whole story had required from the beginning. Dr. Webb sat with it for 2 sessions, processing with me and with my father separately, before she said, "Noah is ready for more of his story. He's been ready for a while. He's been giving you pieces of it, the name, the memories, because some part of him wants it known. He needs the truth told carefully, with support in a way that makes him feel secure rather than disrupted." We told him on a Saturday afternoon. Dr. Webb was present. My father was present. Noah sat on his bed with his drawing pad in his lap, his comfort object, his anchor. I told him that we had learned something important, that the man he remembered, Gerald, who smelled like church, who brought the red truck, was my daddy, which meant that Gerald was Noah's grandfather. And that Noah's grandfather was the same person as my father, that we were family in a way we hadn't known before. Noah listened to all of this with the focused attention he brought to everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at my father, who was sitting in the chair by the window, very still, holding himself together with visible effort. Noah slid off the bed. He walked across the room. He stood in front of my father and looked up at him. My father looked down at him, and Noah held out his hand. The same hand he'd held out to me in that government hallway 2 years ago. That small, deliberate, trusting hand. My father took it. And this time Gerald Archer did cry, quiet, overwhelmed tears that he didn't try to stop. And Noah looked at him with those enormous dark eyes, and then, with the matter-of-fact grace that was entirely his own, leaned forward and put his head against my father's arm. Dr. Webb looked at me across the room. I looked at the ceiling. What followed was not simple. I want to be clear about that, because simple would not be honest. My father had things to reckon with. The relationship with Aisha, the child he hadn't known about, the 2 years he'd spent outside Noah's life because of a rigidity that had cost them both. These were not small reckonings. They required time and honesty and the willingness to be accountable in ways my father had never previously been asked to be accountable. He went to his pastor. He went eventually to a counselor, which for Gerald Archer, a man of his generation and his particular formation, was an act of significant humility. He called Damien and told him the truth. That conversation was hard and necessary, and Damien, being Damien, received it with a practicality that was both slightly unfeeling and deeply useful. He called me every Sunday again, sometimes twice, and he showed up for Noah. Not in a performed, guilt-driven way, in a real way. He came to the house on Saturdays and sat with Noah at the low table with the art supplies and learned, slowly, the language of a child who communicated in pictures and careful words and the gesture of choosing to be near you. He brought Noah a toolbox, a real one, small but functional, and they began the same kind of quiet project work that Damien had started, the companionable male silence around the making of things. Noah called him Grandpa Gerald. He arrived at this on his own, without prompting, delivered it one Saturday morning as my father came through the door, and my father stood in the doorway for a moment and collected himself before he said, "Good morning, Noah." I watched from the kitchen and said nothing and felt everything. This part of the story is the most delicate, and I am going to handle it with the care it deserves. Aisha Williams is Noah's biological mother. She is alive. She is in Nashville. The circumstances that led to Noah's removal from her care were the result of a crisis, mental health, specifically, a breakdown that left her unable to care for him for a period that the state determined was not temporary enough to wait out. She has been in recovery. She has done the work. She does not have parental rights to Noah. Those were terminated as part of the adoption process, but she is a person who exists and who loved her child in the way she was capable of loving him. And Noah deserves, when he is ready, to have access to that truth. I reached out to Aisha through a mutual contact. a social worker who had been involved in Noah's case and who knew both of us. I did not demand a meeting. I sent a letter. I told her that Noah was doing well, that he was safe and loved and finding his voice. I told her that I knew about my father. I told her that there was no anger in me toward her, only the particular, complicated compassion of one woman looking at another woman's hardest chapter. She wrote back, "We have not met in person. We are in the early stages of a correspondence that is slow and careful. Noah does not know yet. He will know, when he is old enough and ready, as much of his story as he wants to know. I will not keep it from him. I will not rush him toward it. His story is his. My job is to make sure it's still there waiting for him when he's ready. Noah is 10 years old now. He talks. Not constantly. He is still a boy who chooses his words with care, who prefers a good drawing to a long conversation, who will sit in comfortable silence with the people he loves and find that sufficient. But he talks. He talks to me about school and about his drawings and about the robotics club he joined this year, which he loves with a focused intensity that does not surprise me at all because Noah has always been someone who pays close attention to how things work. He talks to Grandpa Gerald about tools and about the garden they planted together in the spring and about football, which Noah has become interested in with the specific gravity he brings to all new interests. He talks to Dr. Webb about his feelings in the careful, articulate way of a child who has had good support and learned that feelings are information rather than emergencies. He told me last month that he wants to be an architect when he grows up. He drew me a picture of the house he would design. It had a big porch and a garden in the back and a room full of windows for drawing. I put it on my wall next to the first picture he ever gave me, the house with the two figures. We are still the two figures. We are also more now, Grandpa Gerald and Uncle Damien and Dr. Webb and Mrs. Okafor, and the slowly expanding world of a child who has decided against considerable evidence that the world is worth trusting. That decision, his decision, made in a plastic chair in a government hallway, is the bravest thing I have ever witnessed. Have been Noah's mother for 4 years. Here is what I know. A child's silence is not emptiness. Noah's 2 years of silence were not absence. They were the presence of a child who was listening, processing, deciding. When he finally spoke, it was because he had determined the world was safe enough for his voice. Silence in a child or in anyone is not nothing. It is something. Learn to read it. Your family will surprise you. My father surprised me, first in his rigidity and then in his capacity to change. I had given up quietly on the version of him that could grow. He grew anyway, not on my timeline, not in the way I would have written it, but genuinely, substantially in ways that mattered. People are not fixed, not even the ones who seem most fixed. The connections we don't expect are the ones that remake us. I adopted Noah because I loved him. I did not adopt him to heal my relationship with my father, or to uncover a family secret, or to build a bridge between two parts of my life that had been separated. I adopted him because he held out his hand and I took it. Everything else that followed was not planned. It was life, doing the thing life does, finding the connections that logic would never have predicted. Single mothers are complete. I am saying this plainly because my father said the opposite, and I want it in the record. A single woman who loves a child completely, who shows up every day, who creates safety and stability and a home that a child can grow in, that is a complete family. The shape of a family is not determined by its adult head count. It is determined by its love. I have always known this. I'm glad my father learned it. Your child will teach you things. Noah has taught me patience I did not know I had. He has taught me that communication is larger than language. He has taught me that trust, once given by someone who has every reason not to give it, is one of the most sacred things in the world. He has taught me, by being exactly who he is, careful and precise and brave and quietly extraordinary, what it means to keep going when the going is not guaranteed. He is 10 years old, and he has already taught me more than most people teach me in a lifetime. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. I know it is long. It needed to be long. Some stories cannot be shortened without losing the truth of them. I want to say something to a few specific people before I close. To anyone who has been told their family is not complete, your family is complete. It is complete because you love who is in it with everything you have. Do not let anyone else's picture of what a family looks like make you doubt the reality of what you've built. To anyone considering adoption, it is not easy. It is not for everyone. It requires a specific kind of patience and a willingness to meet a child where they are, rather than where you wish they were. But if you have that, if you are genuinely prepared to do the slow, unglamorous, revolutionary work of helping a child feel safe, it is the most profound thing I have ever done. I say that without sentimentality. I say it as a fact. To anyone estranged from a parent, I left the door open. I did not chase my father. I did not beg. I stated my truth, I made my choice, and I left the door open. He walked through it eventually, not on my timeline, through circumstances neither of us could have predicted. I am not saying this always happens. I am saying the door costs you nothing to leave open. And sometimes the most unexpected thing walks through it. To any child who is waiting, you are worth the wait. You are worth the work. You are worth every form that needs to be filled, and every home study, and every hard conversation. Somewhere there is a person who is looking for exactly you. I know that is easy to say and hard to believe when you are in a plastic chair in a government hallway. But it was true for Noah. It can be true for you. Noah sends his love. He drew a picture for this video. It is the thumbnail. A house with a garden and a big porch and more than 2 figures out front now. Drop your location. Like if this story moved you. Subscribe if you want to stay. And if someone in your life needs to hear this, send it to them. With everything I have,